Hi, sometimes I like to yell at clouds too. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. I was gonna do like a full punk mohawk, but I'm not monetized, y'all. Okay. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going back to Secret Wars. In the last video, we discussed Mystique and Dazzler, who were, if not prototyped, at least planned for Wave 4 of the series. From here on out, we've got a few factions within the comic book event that were never made in the toy line. And specifically today, we're going to look at the X-Men. And the X-Men representing within the Secret Wars event comic were Rogue and Storm. In the last video, we did sort of go over the origins of Secret Wars, but basically, in a nutshell, Mattel was looking at what Kenner was doing with superpowers and said, we need in on that. And they approached Marvel specifically and said, hey, can you make a comic book figuratively and literally smashing your action figures together so that we can make product based off of that? That comic book series was, arguably the first real event comic. For good or ill, there's been many since. And it did spawn the toy line. That said, the toy line was not as successful as Super Flip Powers, so they had 2 and let's say 2.5 waves, and none of the women from the comic book made it into the toy line. If you're watching this channel, I presume you know what an X-Men is. I mean, they are just beloved. They are probably Marvel's crown jewel, although Avengers has been coming for that crown for the past few years thanks to the MCU. The X-Men are essentially a group of mutants, humans who were born with extra abilities, an X gene. And Charles Xavier brings together the X-Men to, basically combat fellow evil mutants and also, bridge the gap for peace between humans and mutants. The original team was 5 white teenagers, and they ran for a little bit, but amidst Marvel's massive success right out of the gates, X-Men was the one redheaded stepchild. It failed pretty spectacularly pretty quickly and just ran in reprints for a number of years before outright being canceled. This would change in 1975 when Giant Size X-Men came out and sort of just relaunched all of the X-Men. Among them was Storm, who in that issue we first met her. She was basically like a pickpocket orphan who was living in Egypt and then moved further west into Africa and became a storm goddess. To the locals. Charles Xavier went to her and said, nay, you're not a goddess, you're actually a mutant. Come help me, rescue the original X-Men. And so she did that, and her character was really kind of like established and baked in from the jump. I mean, she has, absolutely evolved as a character. She's had many different looks, but by and large, I mean, she was Storm through and through from day one and remains so today. Rogue, on the other hand, didn't make her debut until 1981 in Avengers Annual number 10. She was a mutant who could essentially absorb your memories, your personality, and if you had powers, those powers with any skin-to-skin contact. A bit of a Midas touch kind of situation going on with her. She originally debuted as a villain. She was essentially raised by Mystique and Destiny to be part of their, Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. She would go up against Dazzler, Miss Marvel, Carol Danvers, and this would really kind of culminate when Mystique, basically instructed Rogue to grab Carol Danvers' head and just hang on for dear life. The amount of time she holds on to someone usually dictates how long she has the powers. For whatever reason, she kept Carol's powers and her brain inside her head. With 2 personas, a lot more power, and just, random memories from a lot of different people, Rogue had a full mental break. And not 2 years after debuting as a villain in Uncanny X-Men number 171, she came to Charles Xavier begging for help. And, the X-Men were not terribly pleased to see her, but they did sort of, allow her to join the team and prove herself. And prove herself she did. These 2 characters have gone on to become just absolutely synonymous with the X-Men. In fact, both were present during the very first X-Men movie. That's how big a name they are. They were huge in the cartoon series. They are leaders, quite literally, in the mutant community. Who Storm and Rogue are now, however, is very different from even the 90s, much less 1984. You need to bear in mind that, at this time, Storm was just under 10 years old in the comic books, which isn't a long time for long-time readers. Originally, when the Giant Size X-Men came out and the original X-Men were replaced, a lot of people were real butthurt about it. So, I mean, most of that had been done with. I mean, the X-Men had proven themselves to be incredibly popular, often outselling Teen Titans, who they were like neck and neck for sales during much of the 80s. However, there were still a few fanboys who were mad that there's a black lady in their mutants, and thankfully today, we don't have to worry about that anymore. Likewise, Rogue was a very new character. I mean, she had debuted just a few years earlier, and not even a year became an X-Men before joining the Secret Wars comic book. So she was a bit of an odd inclusion. I mean, during this time, there weren't a lot of new members between Giant Size and Rogue's introduction. Kitty Pryde was introduced very early, but she was nowhere in Secret Wars. Beyond the exclusion of Kitty, by and large, the X-Men were all present and accounted for during the Secret Wars. I mean, the story was really the Beyonder picking villains and picking heroes, and again, mashing these action figures together on Battle World. The X-Men were present and made quite a few big splashy pages, but by and large, that's all they were, present. I mean, Storm especially, I mean, she was going through a midlife crisis, and she sort of, did away with her classic gorgeous look and replaced it with a real kind of badass mohawk and punk clothes, and she was just going through it. I mean, if you ever read the series at the time, she's incredible. Likewise, Rogue was very, very new, so I mean, she even made a comment once or twice saying, just a few months ago, I would have been on the villains camp. So I mean, it almost kind of brought up the arbitrariness of heroes versus villains on this, giant playset of a battle world. So with that in mind, and also bearing in mind that Mattel actually, actively asked for more female characters created for Secret Wars to later put in the toy line, their exclusion was odd. I mean, X-Men were just running all cylinders at this time, so strange that, they were never planned. Perhaps they were planned, perhaps there's talk about, including them. I would say especially Storm was much more established than a lot of characters that did appear in Secret Wars. However, that was never meant to be. The final verdict here is a bit of a strange one. So, I mean, if you want just a Rogue and Storm action figure since 1984, there's a lot. I would say the real kickoff would have been Toy Biz's X-Men line from the 1990s. Storm herself, in fact, helped launch the first wave. However, Toy Biz did claim that Storm didn't sell well because she was ugly. And they made a very, public vow never to make female figures again, which was met with a lot of fan backlash. So, again, they picked Rogue and said, hey, we're going to make this also very ugly Rogue. If you buy her, we'll make more. The rest is history. Toy Biz is, almost known in the back half of its run for being very, very female-friendly. Likewise, I mean, going fast forward to today, Marvel Legends has been going strong for decades, it seems. A lot of Storms, a lot of Rogues. I mean, there's a punk Storm from Secret Wars, recently. Just this year of our Lord, 2024, Rogue, in her first appearance costume, likewise made an appearance. So, if you're looking for a Marvel Legends-style Secret Wars team, it's building. On that note, Hasbro Legends is, time of recording, currently shipping Secret Wars packaged figures. They've got the same sort of style as the original figures packaging in giant 6-inch Marvel Legends scale. There's one character they're including in that we'll get to. I don't think they'll be including Storm or Rogue in this round. I think it's sort of a one-and-done kind of deal, to be perfectly honest. That said, in the last video, I did talk about this, and I did posit, since Hasbro loves, a retro re-release line like Ghostbusters, like Star Wars, why not do proper Secret Wars? And I gotta eat crow here a little bit and tell you, that ain't never gonna happen. So early in the 80s, when Mattel was in their, peak bloom doing Masters of the Universe, they got suing mad when other companies were doing bootlegs or knockoffs of the He-Man style body construction of their figures. They went to court to argue that they own this body style. John Law said, no, you don't. You never trademarked it, you never copyrighted, you have no legal, reason to claim that this body style action figure is yours. When Secret Wars came back around, Mattel was way ahead of the game. And they do very legally, very firmly own this kind of awkward, gangly body style that no one really wants, but the fact is, if we're going through this retro revival, we kind of want it. That said, if you think Hasbro is going to pay Mattel for the use of this body, y'all know me by now. If there's no official route, I will go third-party or customizers. So in terms of these two specific looks, For these two characters, there's not a lot. However, Toy Otter, who we've talked about before, in association with Joshua Izzo, you should follow them both. I'll have a description of their Instagrams in the link below. They've done a first appearance Rogue in the Secret Wars kind of style body, and she looks fantastic. They've also done a Storm in more of her first appearance look. You can kind of see her in the background there. Likewise, these are great. I mean, everything these two guys do is superb. So as Secret Wars, kind of gets bigger, likewise, because of, the name itself being, in association with Marvel Cinematic Universe very shortly in the next few years, expect to see maybe a few more in the future. And that's it for Mattel's Secret Wars Storm and Rogue. We have a few other factions from Secret Wars to get through. Not as many as Superpowers, but there's more coming. If you're a Secret Wars fan, stay tuned. And I want to thank you for watching, for liking, for commenting, for subscribing, for all those YouTube-y things. And I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.